Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Montreal, Canada for Reason to Resist on August 10th, 2026. Last week, as we reported on this channel, the Saudi, Turkish, and Pakistani vassals of Washington entered into something called the Mecca Joint Defence Agreement. Although the signatories have not published the actual text of their agreement, they issued a joint statement stating that the agreement provides that an attack on one member of the trio constitutes an attack on all members. Well, Yemen's Ansar has wasted no time in putting the Mecca agreement to the test. According to reports on resistance channels, Ansar struck oil facilities in Saudi Arabia this weekend. It also struck what it described as Saudi mercenaries stationed in parts of Yemen that Ansar does not control, at least not at this particular moment. In this report, we'll look more closely at the attacks by Ansar. I'll also update you on recent developments in the Strait of Hormuz, on oil markets, and on Lebanon. Now, before we get into it, please remember to like and share this video if you find it to be informative. And if you're not already a subscriber to Reason to Resist, please do become one and help us to expand the reach of our unapologetic, on-the-ground resistance journalism. So with that, let's get into it. Yemen's Ansar movement has carried out a large-scale attack on Saudi military positions and weapons depots in the Yemeni port city of Mecca, using a significant number of missiles and drones. And just to orient us, I'm putting up on the screen here a map of the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, and you can see there a red dot near the center of this image up on the screen. That is where Bandar al-Mocha, the Yemeni city struck by Ansar forces, is situated. So you can see it's essentially on the Bab al-Mandeb Strait and on the coastline of the country. Now, Ansar claims to have destroyed military equipment and inflicted casualties on Saudi forces there, vowing to continue tracking Saudi movements under the principle, quote, siege for siege, escalation for escalation, close quote. Pro-government media reported around 20 drone strikes on Mocha, causing severe damage to infrastructure there. And here's a video showing the aftermath of those attacks. Now, in addition, a satellite has detected a major thermal event at the Berry gas plant near Jubail on the Saudi Gulf Coast, with an estimated 125 megawatt fire radiative power. And here is the satellite image in question. You can see those red squares denote the detection of fire at the facility. And again, just to orient ourselves, I'll put up on the screen a map of the Saudi Persian Gulf coast. And there in the center of the image, you can see the red dot. That is where Jubail is situated, just north of Bahrain and Qatar. Now, Ansar has claimed credit for the attack on Bandar al-Mocha, the Saudi forces there. But as far as I know, no resistance group has claimed credit so far for attacking the Berry facility. There is also news of a fire having broken out this weekend at the Saudi refinery in Jazan, which has been hit before and repeatedly by Ansar and is near the Saudi border with Yemen. And here's a video of what is reported to be that fire, although I've not been able to confirm that this is in fact a video of that fire. Now, I should stress that with respect to this incident as well, I'm not aware of any resistance group having claimed responsibility for hitting the Jazan refinery this weekend. But I think in light of everything that has been transpired this far, there is good reason to believe that one or both of these incidents, whether at Jubail or at Jazan, resulted from an attack by a resistance group, and it might very well have been Ansar. But as I stated, Ansar has in fact taken credit for the attack on the Saudi forces in Bandar al-Mocha. So the question, of course, now arises, what is this new fangled defense alliance going to do about all of this? So far, I've not seen any statement by the regimes in Turkey or Pakistan about the attack on Saudi forces and the possibility of resistance having struck one or two Saudi oil facilities this weekend. I see no indication that they're going to take any military action. And this is essentially what I predicted would happen in a report that we published on Saturday about, it was devoted almost entirely to the subject of this new Mecca Defense Agreement. And the prediction that I made, and it's based, frankly, on a number of factors, the most important of which is that these three regimes have done absolutely nothing through nearly 3 full years of in-your-face genocide carried out by Israel and the United States and other Western backers of Israel in occupied Palestine, which has now spread to the West Bank and to South Lebanon. They've done absolutely nothing. They've not imposed meaningful sanctions on Israel, the United States, or other arms suppliers of Israel. The Turks haven't even cut off the flow of Azerbaijani oil to Israel. They haven't intervened militarily, as the Axis of Resistance has done over and over again to try to stop the genocide, and has done at great cost to itself. They have not kicked U.S. military personnel out of their country. In the case of Saudi Arabia, they continue to allow U.S. military forces to use their soil and their air to facilitate attacks on Iran and other elements of the Axis of Resistance. The Saudis refuse to lift the blockade on Yemen, the cruel, inhumane blockade that's been in place for over a decade. They participated in a joint attack on the Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq, even though they denied having attacked Saudi Arabia. I could go on and on. When you have such a long and sordid record of betrayal of the Palestinian people, utter contempt for the opinions of ordinary citizens of these countries, and abject servitude to Washington, why would anybody think that this defense pact is anything more than theater? It's just theater. It's you could call it a kind of deterrence kabuki theater. They're trying to create the impression in the minds of the members of the Axis of Resistance that if they attack Saudi Arabia, there is going to be hell to pay from both Turkey and Pakistan. But whether or not they're actually prepared to carry out that threat is another matter altogether. And we may find out in the days ahead that they are, in fact, willing to do that. I don't think it's going to change a damn thing, by the way. If the United States, and Israel, which expended so many munitions to the point that they're now seriously depleted, and carried out so many sorties, so many airstrikes, so many missile strikes, if they haven't been able to subdue the Axis of Resistance, why would anybody think that Pakistan and Turkey are going to change the equation? And I'm pretty sure that is how the leaders of the resistance view this as well. It isn't going to affect materially their approach to resisting U.S. hegemony. And as I say, we may find out otherwise in the days ahead, but I would be very, very surprised about that based on the long and sordid record of servitude to Washington of these three regimes. Now, I've gotten some pushback on my interpretation of this defense pact. There seems to be, with all due respect, some hopium out there that this actually marks some kind of a change in the attitudes of these three regimes. And I certainly understand why people would like to believe, I would like to believe, that this marks some kind of a sea change in the attitudes of these three regimes to the brutal wars of aggression being waged by the West and Israel in the region. And they're finally going to stand up to Washington. They're finally going to stand up to Tel Aviv. I very much hope that's true. And one person who seems to be of that view, person I respect in the alternative media, David Hurst of the Middle East Eye, he just authored an article. It was published today on the Middle East Eye, in which he argued that American weakness has prompted these three regimes to seek to reshape the Middle East order and that the three biggest regional powers have chosen to break the cycle of colonial domination by Israel. That is the view that David Hurst argues for. I, again, very much hope that he's right, but I have a simple rule of thumb that I apply. When you've spent your entire political career kowtowing to Washington and betraying the Palestinian people and disregarding the overwhelming majority of the people in your country who want you to put a stop to these crimes by Israel and its Western backers, well, I assume the worst about these people. I don't give them the benefit of the doubt, and I don't think anybody should give them the benefit of the doubt. Erdogan, bin Salman, and Shehbaz Sharif of Pakistan, they don't deserve any generous assumptions from any of us. But at the end of the day, we're going to find out one way or another, because the attacks on Saudi Arabia will continue so long as Saudi Arabia refuses to lift this criminal, sadistic blockade on Yemen and continues to allow the U.S. military to use its territory and its airspace to facilitate attacks on the resistance. With that, let's turn to the Strait of Hormuz. As we reported on Saturday, Iran's government insists that even if it reaches an agreement with Oman as to the future management of the Strait of Hormuz, it will not open the strait until the Trump regime satisfies several onerous conditions. These include a lifting of the U.S. blockade on Iran, a lifting of U.S. sanctions on Iran, withdrawing U.S. military forces from the region, the payment of war reparations by the United States to Iran, and the release of all stolen Iranian assets. Now, every single one of these demands is perfectly reasonable. After all, Iran has been subjected to criminal, illegal forms of aggression for decades at great cost to its people. And there was really no lawful or moral justification for what these criminal Western regimes and Israel were doing to Iran. And there's every reason, and in fact, I would say, argue as a lawyer, that this is my considered legal opinion, that the United States has an obligation to do effectively all of these things, certainly to pay reparations and to cease the blockade, which is an act of war for which there is no lawful justification. These are eminently reasonable demands, both as a moral matter and as a legal matter, but the reality is that they go far beyond the maximalist negotiating position of the United States. Essentially, the position of the United States is that Iran should capitulate, surrender, even though, for the time being at least, it has decisively won this war and at great cost to itself. So what does this all mean? This all means, of course, that there is virtually no prospect of the Strait of Hormuz being opened anytime soon. And the other thing I would note is that these conditions are, in fact, more onerous than the Memorandum of Understanding, which the United States violated 6 ways from Sunday. So under the Memorandum of Understanding, the United States agreed to lift sanctions on Iran only after and if it agreed to some mutually acceptable limits on Iran's nuclear program. Now the Iranians are saying nothing about that. They're saying you need to lift the sanctions before we'll even open up the Strait of Hormuz. They're not even talking about accepting any restrictions on their nuclear program. And also, they were demanding that only $12 billion of the stolen assets be released before they opened up the Strait of Hormuz under the MOU. Now they're demanding that they all be released before they open up the Strait of Hormuz. And I could go on and on. There are a number of ways in which this is more onerous than the MOU. And so this harkens back to something that Professor Robert Pape of the University of Chicago, who's a specialist in escalation and escalation traps, has been saying that Iran has moved from the goal of survival to the goal of ambition. It wants to become more powerful. It wants to become the dominant power of the region. And by all accounts, it should be, given the unique and attributes of this country, this very large, well-resourced and capable country in the heart of the region. And as far as I can tell, its ambitions are growing by the day, which again leads one rationally to conclude that the Strait of Hormuz is going to remain closed for a very long time. And I would suspect that it probably will remain closed until beyond the midterm elections in the United States in November. Now, just to make sure, that oil markets got the message that the Strait of Hormuz ain't going to open up anytime soon. The Iranians reportedly struck yet another tanker in the Strait of Hormuz last night, shortly before global oil markets reopened. And here's a video of what is reported to be a tanker ablaze in the strait. Now, it seems as if the oil market, at least for the time being, has gotten the message loudly and clearly from Iran. Here is the data from oilprice.com on the trading price of various forms of crude oil and oil products. This is a screenshot from the data appearing on oilprice.com a little after noon Eastern time today. And you can see on the left-hand side in the second row from the top, the price of Brent crude has gone up about 3.7% today. In dollar terms, that's $3.08, and is trading just below $87 a barrel. And I would expect if the market is not rigged and it is behaving rationally, that the price will continue to rise inexorably in the weeks ahead. Now, turning from the Strait of Hormuz and oil markets to Lebanon briefly, I wanted to share with you some news published by Al Mayadeen today about the state of the negotiations between the genocidal Israeli entity and the national government of Lebanon. According to Al Mayadeen, a source has informed it, a knowledgeable source from the diplomatic community, that there are now no new negotiations with Israel planned for next month, and that key disputes remain unresolved. And the article explains that, according to the source, the United States and Israeli side rejected expanding the existing pilot areas in South Lebanon, which are supposed to be taken over by the Lebanese National Army, before achieving progress in the two areas previously designated for negotiations. According to the source, the Lebanese delegation also rejected Israeli claims that all explosions in southern Lebanon resulted from strikes against military infrastructure. That is laughably false. It is clear beyond any shadow of a doubt, the Israeli military officials themselves, officers, have reported to the Israeli media that the Israelis have been destroying civilian infrastructure in the south of Lebanon. And they've leveled to the ground entire villages. So this is an insult to our intelligence. The Lebanese source also told Al Mayadeen that the U.S. and Israeli delegations demanded the withdrawal of Hezbollah from the Ali al-Taher heights in the Nabatea area. This is again in southern Lebanon. It is a strategic height, and there's no prospect of the resistance withdrawing from this very important area. And the Israelis and the Americans undoubtedly know this. And so making this demand, which is completely unacceptable, and there's no way for the Lebanese national government to force Hezbollah to comply with the demand, even if it wanted Hezbollah to comply with the demand, this can only mean that the Americans and the Israelis are not really interested in any kind of a just and lasting peace with Lebanon at all. And the article goes on to say the latest developments indicate that significant differences remain between the Lebanese side and the U.S.-Israeli delegations, with disputes over the scope of the negotiations and developments in southern Lebanon continuing to complicate prospects for another round of talks. So for people who are clinging to the hope that the Lebanese resistance is going to be disarmed, it's time for you to take a cold shower and wake up to the reality that ain't going to happen. It never was going to happen, and it's even less likely to happen now than it was while these negotiations were actually taking place. Now, in related news, the Wall Street Journal has just published an editorial in which it is sounding the alarm bells about the vulnerability of U.S. military bases around the world. And here you can see the headline of that article. America's military is dangerously exposed. The Iran war proves it, and the Chinese threat is greater. We need new thinking about defense. By the way, I think I misspoke. I said it was an editorial. It's actually an op-ed by Seth Jones. And Jones begins the article by saying that since the beginning of Operation Epic Fury, Iran has conducted more than 2,000 air, missile, and drone strikes across the Middle East, damaging at least 20 sites in 8 countries used by the US military. There is certainly no precedent for this, by the way, in the entire post-World War II period, that this many sites of US military facilities in this many countries have been damaged severely by a country attacked by the United States. And the article goes on and says Iran has so far caused as much as $13 billion to the US, $13 billion to the US alone in equipment losses and facility damage. I suspect the number is much higher than that. In total, Iran has damaged or destroyed more than 42 US military aircraft, several of which were parked on air bases. The recent Iranian strikes at Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan killed 3 US soldiers and damaged airfield hangars and other infrastructure. And in Qatar, the U.S. Combined Air Operations Center sustained severe damage. Iranian strikes wounded U.S. personnel and damaged aircraft in Saudi Arabia. In Bahrain, Iran hit the headquarters of the U.S. Naval Forces Central Command, radar, satellite communications dishes, and warehouses. Iran also targeted U.S. aircraft hangars and satellite communication systems in Kuwait. In addition, Iran and its partner forces targeted the U.S. embassies in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Iraq, as well as the U.S. consulate in Dubai, among others. And by the way, in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, the reports are that Iran actually struck the section of the U.S. embassy that was reserved for the CIA. And there are other reports of CIA facilities having been struck across the region. And Mr. Jones goes on to state that the U.S. has been too slow to learn from the war in Ukraine and protect its bases and other infrastructure in the Middle East. The challenge in the Pacific is much greater. China presents a more serious threat than Iran, with a larger and more capable stockpile of drones and cruise, ballistic, and hypersonic missiles. U.S. military bases and other infrastructure across the Pacific are highly vulnerable to Chinese and North Korean missiles and drones. The U.S. needs to get serious about protecting its critical infrastructure. The first urgent step is increasing active defenses, which include air defense systems that can identify, shoot down, or otherwise disrupt incoming missiles and drones. And he offers some examples. One might add that last year, the Trump regime was allocated by the United States Congress approximately $1 trillion for military spending. And prior to Trump returning to the White House in January, the U.S. military budget was, under Biden, approached $1 trillion. It was above $900 billion when Biden left office. So the really sort of pressing question here is, why doesn't the U.S. have these things already? It spends more than twice as much on its military. Now it's probably in the range of 3 to 4 times as much on its military as Russia and China combined. But they aren't running out of munitions. There's absolutely, even Russia, which has been waging a war against the entirety of NATO since February 2022. In fact, if anything, its munitions seem to be growing in number. So the real issue here is that the United States military budget is a gigantic fraud, and that U.S. weapons manufacturers are basically robbing the American people blind. And they're only trying to steal more money with each passing year, and Congress continues to facilitate its outright theft of the wealth of the American people. That's the real problem, and it's not one, of course, that the Wall Street Journal has any interest in taking on its op-ed pages. Now, as if to drive the point home, Tasnim News of Iran has published new satellite imagery of damage done to U.S. military bases in West Asia. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to determine from the very brief post on Tasnim News exactly which military bases I'm about to show you, but you can see the extent of the damage nonetheless. Here's a target shown before a strike in the lower left-hand corner. And then you can see afterwards what the target looks like. And then up above, a more detailed image of the aftermath of the strike. And you can see a huge crater there in the remains of a building that has been thoroughly destroyed, much of it blown away. Here is another image showing, again, lower left-hand corner. You can see a number of structures intact, circled in red. And then in the lower right-hand corner, you can see the aftermath and a number of these structures have been visibly damaged. And then up top in this image, you get a closer, more detailed view showing the degree of damage that many of these structures have suffered. And I'll show you one more here. Again, you can see the before and after in the lower corners, and up top, detailed imagery of a number of these structures, which may be barracks. These could be hangars, but I can count at least, I would say 15 that have been somewhere between 15 and 20 of these rectangular structures have been either flattened or destroyed beyond repair. So yes, indeed, despite the gigantic military budget of the United States, the U.S. military is utterly incapable of protecting its military forces and materiel in the region of West Asia. And that's undoubtedly true all around the world, wherever U.S. military bases may be found, and there is a capable adversary nearby. Now, finally, a couple of news items relating to the genocidal Israeli entity. Israeli media report that an Israeli terrorist was found dead at a terrorist base in southern Israel in the last few days. The Jerusalem Post reports that the circumstances of this soldier's death are under investigation. I've seen further reports suggesting that this is indeed a suicide, although that hasn't been confirmed yet. And in that regard, Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, reported earlier this month that as of August 1st of this year, 17 Israeli terrorists had taken their lives. Of course, when I say terrorists, I'm referring to what Israelis call soldiers in the Israeli military. And those 17, that's just in the first 7 months of 2026. So they're on a pace, if they continue at this rate of suicide, to have about 30 suicides or so in 2026. Haaretz reports that in the decade preceding this genocidal war, the Israeli military averaged 12 active duty soldier suicides per year. And according to military data, 7 active duty soldiers died by suicide between October 7th and the end of 2023, followed by 21 suicides in 2024 and 22 in 2025. So the number is rising significantly. And by the way, the 2025 number was the highest annual total in the prior 15 years. Now, there's not only a suicide crisis in Israel's genocidal army, there's also a morale crisis, a munitions crisis, and an incompetence crisis. And despite all of these crises, the Netanyahu regime is now making noises about taking on Iran alone. There are multiple reports of this. We see these reports periodically. There's the genocidal, child-murdering war criminal Netanyahu with a smug grin on his face. I assure you, my friends, that if the lunatics in Tel Aviv muster the insanity, the insane resolve to revive the war, the hot war on Iran, they're not going to be doing it alone. There'll be plenty of help being provided to them, not just by the United States government, but numerous other regimes in the West, including the Germans, the British, the French. Pretty much all the major Western powers will be in on it, although they may well be acting assiduously to conceal the nature and extent of their assistance to Israel. The idea that this little genocidal, child-murdering pipsqueak of a country could take on Iran by itself is frankly laughable. That ain't going to happen, and it never has happened. It has always been the collective West backing up Israel in all of its wars of aggression, including its wars of aggression on Iran. That being said, I believe that there is going to be a resumption of the hot war on Iran, and in all likelihood, the U.S. will be overtly, not covertly, overtly playing a leading role in that attack. Nothing will be achieved by that resumption of the hot war other than more death and destruction and a hardening of Iran's position and a further weakening of the credibility and capability of the already highly compromised American military. With that, my friends, I'm signing off today on August 10th, 2026 from Montreal, Canada.